Gaming Gladiators offlaner Ace had a 90% win rate on Underlord, going 9-1 at the Riyadh Masters. Unfortunately, the game he lost was the elimination game, and before that, he had a literal 100% win rate in 9 games. Let's see how he was able to do that and what we can learn from it. Underlord has unique strengths. He's one of the most versatile heroes when it comes to itemization. Other than that, his kit allows him to focus on scaling through farming while also being able to join fights because he has global presence thanks to his ultimate. Even if Underlord ends up having a bad lane, the hero recovers fairly well thanks to his Firestorm spell. Putting these things aside, the hero itself is quite brain dead and simple to play, so even if you are not an Underlord player, you can pick this hero and perform well with it, given that you focus on every part of this guide. For his early itemization, Ace has 3 variations. The most common itemization he does is Quelling Blade, Double Gauntlets, Double Branch, and Tangos. The Double Gauntlet can be upgraded to Soul Ring later on, and the branches can be used to buy a magic wand. The stats also help with base damage and HP. The Quelling Blade helps with more damage for last hitting and can sometimes be used to cut waves by destroying the trees. When he's laning against low base damage opponents or a lane with a lot of chipping harass, he tends to go triple gauntlet, a branch, and a set of tangos. This gives him slightly more base damage and HP than the first build. One gauntlet can be used to buy a bracer, and the other 2 can be used to buy a soul ring. If he's in a lane where there will be a lot of spell usage, for example, a lane with Razor and CM, he goes for double gauntlet, double branch, and a magic stick. He calls for Tangos from his courier after getting the bounty runes. This allows him to not compromise on the stats and also be able to sustain through the stick charges. If you want to keep it simple, the first variation is fine to go with in almost any game. The rest of the itemization will be discussed later on in this video. One notable thing about Ace is that he's always laning against hard matchups that Underlord is supposed to lose, but he always has decent farm regardless of the lane he is in. I watched almost every replay of his in Riyadh Masters and figured out how he always ends up having a good amount of farm after the laning phase. I'll go over it step by step. The first and most important thing in the laning phase is skilling the right ability at level 1. Ace tends to hold his skill point till the waves meet and decides to skill between his Firestorm and Atrophy Aura after assessing the situation of the lane. If his lane partner, aka the position 4, does not have a way to secure the range creep and there is an opportunity to secure creeps, he tends to take Firestorm at level 1 so that he can use it to zone out the enemy and secure the creeps. By using Firestorm, you give the enemy 2 choices. If they want to try to deny the creep, they have to take the damage of the Firestorm, or if they don't want to take damage, they have to give up on trying to deny the creep. Ace tends to skill Atrophy Aura at level 1 if the enemy is going to go on him in the form of physical damage. Atrophy Aura reduces the overall physical damage Underlord would take thanks to the damage reduction. Other than that, Underlord already has good base damage, and Atrophy Aura amps it up even more, allowing Ace to deny a bunch of creeps and secure a lot of last hits. It is very crucial to skill the correct ability at level 1, and by using this information, you can decide what you need to skill. Make sure to hold the skill point until you are in a situation where you have the proper answer. Underlord's laning phase is quite simple. This hero doesn't play for kills or constantly harassing the opponent. It plays to outfarm and annoy the enemy. In the early levels, Ace focuses heavily on denying and securing creeps. It is very crucial to be good at last hitting on this hero. With the additional damage from Atrophy Aura and the damage reduction on the opponent, Underlord can not only secure last hits but also have tons of denies easily. Ace uses Firestorm on creep waves whenever the enemy is close by, so they take some of the damage or they have to give the wave up, then he gets to farm it for free. This is mainly how you lane on Underlord. Laning isn't that big of a headache on Underlord, but the correct item progression in the laning phase is. Ace has a few variations when it comes to item progression in the lane. The most common one is where he rushes the Ring of Health and upgrades it into Vanguard. It all depends upon the situation. If Ace is in a lane where there will be a lot of harass on him and he needs physical damage reduction, he tends to rush the Ring of Health and then upgrades that into Vanguard as soon as possible without buying anything else. Vanguard has multiple upgradable pathways. It can be upgraded into Crimson Guard or disassembled into Pipe, both of which can be useful in different situations. If Ace is in a lane where the enemy has slows or rely on reach to be able to harass him, for example against heroes like Ursa, Slark or Razor, he tends to rush brown boots and windlass before anything else. Vanguard does not help him in these types of lanes, and you can actually never trade right clicks with these heroes, as Ursa has Fury Swipes, Slark has Essence Shift, and Razor has a mix of magical and physical damage. These heroes actually like hitting you more, so buying Vanguard is counterproductive. In these lanes, you need to rely on your magical damage through Firestorm to come out ahead, so rushing brown boots into mana boots is good. In case Ace does not plan on buying Greaves later on, he sometimes buys Phase Boots instead of Arcane Boots. Other than that, after he has either Vanguard or Arcane Boots, he upgrades the Gauntlets into Soul Ring. This allows him to constantly spam his Firestorm without worrying about mana problems. Every video takes a lot of effort, and I want to keep helping you guys by making quality content. If you are enjoying the video, please make sure to like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe. Now back to the guide. If Ace loses his lane, he tends to stack camps and uses Firestorm to farm them. This spell allows Underlord to farm camps and waves really fast, which allows him to recover. Underlord is an item timing based hero, and he has the capability to get to those item timings, so this hero focuses a lot on farming. After Ace has 3 levels in his Firestorm, he plays to accelerate his farm. He drags the enemy creep waves whenever he can and pulls them into a neutral camp and uses Firestorm to farm both at the same time. This allows him to have insane amounts of net worth at minute 10. Most people think that offlaners shouldn't be farming that much, but Ace farms on Underlord as if he is the main character. He usually has around 60 plus last hits at minute 10 pretty much every game. If Ace cannot drag the enemy creep wave, he uses Firestorm to push them in, and if he can pressure the tower, he does that. If not, he goes and farms the side camps. We've already discussed what to skill at level 1. Now let's discuss the overall lane skill build. The first 2 levels are going to be your Firestorm and Atrophy Aura, and at level 3, the way you decide whether to put the second point in your Firestorm or Atrophy Aura is by judging the lane. If you're in a lane where the enemy has more right click damage than magical, then Atrophy Aura point is better at level 3. If the enemy has magical damage like Razor plus CM lane, then second point in Firestorm at level 3 is better, as it allows you to spam it on them and reduce their HP. After that, you put the fourth point between Firestorm or Atrophy Aura depending upon what is available. At level 5, you put the third point in Firestorm, as it is your farming and damage tool. At level 6, you don't skill your ultimate, you take a point in your Pit of Malice, as that is still the laning phase and you can't contribute that much with your ultimate without Pit of Malice. At level 7, you put the fourth point in Firestorm and take ultimate at level 8. After that, you max out your Atrophy Aura. This is your lane skill build. Underlord functions quite similarly to Spectre in terms of joining fights, except that Underlord farms way faster. Underlord's ult allows him to have a global presence. In terms of joining fights, Ace joins pretty much every skirmish as long as he has his ultimate off cooldown. Underlord is a pretty boss ass hero. He keeps farming, and if a fight starts somewhere, he just portals in. It is crucial to join every skirmish, as Underlord usually has all the key items required to win a fight. He is the aura carrier and the catch in most cases, so missing out on fights is a no-go. As mentioned before, Underlord is probably one of the most versatile heroes when it comes to itemization. This hero can buy auras, saves, catch, and pretty much anything depending upon the game. After lane itemization, Ace has different types of itemization. Let's say he is playing against a heavy magic lineup, something like a Leshrac and Phoenix, for example, but his lane matchup does physical damage. In this case, he tends to buy Vanguard and then disassembles it into a pipe later on. If he does not require a Vanguard, he pretty much rushes pipe with a Ring of Health as his laning component. If Ace is against a lineup which has physical damage as well as magical damage, something like a Tidehunter, Primal Beast, and Morphling for example, he buys Ring of Health as his laning component, followed by Arcane Boots, and then rushes Mechanism. After Mechanism, he buys Pipe rather than upgrading it into a Greaves. Mechanism is very useful against lineups that rely on their initial burst to win fights. For example, this lineup wants to use Ravage and Primal Beast spells to win the fight, but the Mechanism heal will not let that happen. The basic idea is that if the enemy can't take long fights and your team can, Mech is a good buy. If Ace is against a physical damage lineup, something like a Draw Ranger, Ember Spirit, and Legion Commander, he goes for the Crimson Guard. He buys Vanguard as his laning item, followed by Arcane Boots into Crimson Guard. In terms of your first big item, think about what is the majority of the enemy damage. If it's physical damage and your heroes have decent armor, then Crimson Guard is the way to go. If it's magical damage, then Pipe is the way to go. If they have high burst damage, then Greaves is usually better than Pipe as a first item, or Mech into Pipe is another option. For example, if they have a spell like Roar, you can save your teammates with the Greaves or Mech. One notable thing about Ace is that he farms a lot. He pretty much farms the entire game unless he's fighting. Since Underlord's ultimate allows him to be anywhere on the map, he can consistently keep farming without worrying about following his teammates. The farming part alone isn't notable. Where he farms is what we need to focus on. In Dota, your carry is usually the one taking all of the safe farm, so you have to make sure you're not taking that farm from your carry. Ace pretty much farms in the danger spots or wherever his carry or mid laner are not farming. The lesson here is to always scale and farm whatever you can without stealing it from your carry or mid laner, and try to focus on getting the unsafe farm. Unsafe farm is something inaccessible to your carry but is accessible to you because you are a chunky boy who can throw Firestorm from fog and run away. We've discussed the lane skill build before, let's discuss the overall skill build. Ace maxes his Firestorm followed by Atrophy Aura and then Pit of Malice. From level 4 onwards, this is his skill build. He takes the third point in Firestorm at level 5 followed by a point in Pit of Malice at level 6 rather than ult, which we discussed before. At level 7, he maxes out his Firestorm followed by ultimate at level 8. At level 9 and 10, he puts points in Atrophy Aura rather than taking talent at level 10. He usually does not skill the first talent until level 16, unless he's in a game where extra armor is necessary. Then he skills it at level 11. After Atrophy Aura, he maxes out his Pit of Malice. In terms of his talents, for the level 10 talent, he always takes the plus 5 armor as the Firestorm radius is not that useful because the AoE is enough by default. At level 15, he takes the Pit of Malice AoE talent as that will allow him to catch foes from a wider range. At level 10, he takes the Firestorm percentage damage increase talent as it increases the overall damage of the spell, which helps in fights as well as in pushing lanes. In some situations, he goes for the damage reduction talent if he's against some heavy physical damage hero like Terrorblade, Drow Ranger, Morphling, for example. For the last talent at level 25, Ace mainly takes the increased duration on the route. If his team needs physical damage to take down buildings or do more physical damage in fights, he takes the bonus allied hero damage talent. After his initial big items, Ace has different additions to his build. He can go for a Halberd, Hex, or Nullifier. The basic explanation behind the itemization is that he addresses the head-on issues one by one. For example, if he's against a lineup where there is magical damage as well as physical damage, he will decide which is more potent against his team. If he buys a pipe for the magic damage, he will buy something for the physical damage after that, something like a Greaves or a Crimson Guard, for example. In a lot of cases, if his team is owning and they lack catch, he will buy an Eros so that he can limit the enemy's movement and provide setup for his team. When the head-on issues are addressed, then he looks further into what he needs. If there is a high physical damage hero in the enemy team, he will buy a Halberd to limit the damage. If there is a need of a Dispel for himself and his teammates, he will buy a Lotus Orb. If there is a need for an instant catch, he goes for Hex. Usually, you'll go for something that helps you in the lane, something like a Vanguard or Boots, followed by a first item upgrade that helps your team. It could be something like a Pipe, Mech, or Crimson Guard. After that, you decide what else can you buy to mitigate the damage output of the enemy team and buy further items. Once that is done, then you look for items such as Lotus Orb, Halberd, Hex, etc. depending upon what you need in the game. The whole idea is to fuck with the enemy whilst making the game better for your own team. Underlord is a tanky offlaner, which means that he usually is on the front lines when it comes to team fighting. As soon as Ace sees a fight about to break out, he instantly uses his ult to join up. As an offlaner with auras and team items, it's crucial to be in the fights on time. As soon as Ace joins in the fight, he tries to become the center of attention, forcing the enemy to go on him so that his team can use that space to take better trades. Since Underlord usually has a lot of aura items that can help him survive, it's usually bait for the enemy to go on him. Other than that, Ace right-clicks the enemy a lot because he always has high physical damage thanks to the Atrophy aura. Since Underlord has global presence, Ace is usually the one seen pushing out waves and fixing lanes. He can very easily do that and join up with his team when required. This is something all Underlord players should do as long as they have their ultimate, as it removes a burden from your teammates' shoulders. When it comes to Highground Sieging, Ace is usually seen standing behind his cores that are hitting the buildings. He cannot afford to hit the buildings because if the enemy goes on him and kills him, he won't be able to protect his teammates. He stays behind and provides cover with his Pit of Malice and auras. If you are interested in private coaching, you can join my Discord linked in description. Please make sure to subscribe and like the video for more high quality content like this. Do let me know in the comments if you have any feedback. Otherwise, have a nice day and good luck with your games.